In this video, we'll learn how to set up a while loop in p5js. So this is one of two options you have for looping control structures in your code. It's a little bit less commonly used than the other type of loop that we'll cover in a different video, but these are good to cover since the formatting and the syntax are very similar to a control structure you already know, and that is the if statement. So in our code here, we've got a bunch of repeating lines that we're using to draw out the legs of Cody the caterpillar. And I'd like to condense all this down. So I'd like to get the computer to do a lot of the grunt work for me here that I've had to do by repeating so much duplicate code. First thing I'll do is get rid of all but the first two lines of that duplicate code. All right, so we're only getting one leg anymore. We'll fix that in a second. Let's say instead of a loop, we just wanted a conditional statement. So we might code something like if leg x is less than 150, execute these two lines of code. Now if we think this through, I'm initializing leg x right here with a value of 50. So when we get to our conditional, this Boolean statement, leg x is less than 150, is true. And that's why we see our line getting drawn on the screen. Now the reason I've set this up in this way is to show you how similar that conditional statement is to using a while loop. So we're going to change this code just a little bit, and we are going to say while leg x is less than 150, execute these two lines of code. And I can see now, rather than just drawing the first leg, P5 has automatically drawn a bunch of additional legs for us. And that's because, unlike the if statement, which only gets evaluated once when it's true, the while statement will repeat again and again and again the code that's inside of its block as long as its conditional statement is true. So as long as that leg x is less than 150, these two lines of code get repeated again and again and again. So we've just told the computer, hey, just repeat those two lines that we initially had to copy and paste manually all throughout our code. Now, this is really cool because we get lots of flexibility in addition to the complexity. So for instance, I could make additional copies just by changing my conditional statement here. So rather than leg x is less than 150, maybe I want it to be 200. Now I can see I get more legs, and maybe then I'll actually increase the body length a little bit to match. Oops, maybe a little bit too much, but luckily, again, I can come back here and I can tweak this. So you can start to see just how easy and flexible setting up a loop in your code can make your sketches. So while we're using a while loop, there are actually three distinct steps that we need to make sure that we follow so that things work properly. So the first is to declare and initialize a variable. And in this case, we've done this here on line 17 by saying let leg x equal 50. Then in our while loop, we need a conditional statement. And inside of a while loop, this is something called the exit condition. So we call it that because when that condition is no longer true, the loop will exit, it will stop repeating. And we need to make sure that we set our code up in such a way so that this condition does eventually become false. Because if we don't, the code will loop forever and ever and ever and potentially crash your computer, making you have to hard restart it. And that brings us to the third step, which is to make changes to that variable so that eventually our exit condition will become false and the loop will stop. So again, step number one, we declare and initialize a variable. Step number two, we set up our while loop with an exit condition. And step number three, we change our variable, either adding to it or subtracting to it, so that eventually that exit condition becomes false. Okay, that's how to use while loops in p5js.